So let's compare the discretionary powers available to the President of India versus the discretionary powers of the governors. First thing is very clear that in case of President, Constitution does not explicitly envisage any discretionary powers. Whereas in context of governors, Article 163 has clearly envisaged discretion. That is the first reason why it is said that governors of Indian states enjoy more discretion than the President of India. Second reason is that after 42nd Amendment, 1976, the aid and advice of Prime Minister and Council of Ministers has been made binding on the President by inclusion of that word shall. We discussed this in the previous part. That how the Article 74 says that there shall be a Council of Ministers with the PM at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall act as per the advice in his executive functions. But that change of making the advice binding has not been made in context of governor. Have a look yourself. So does this article say that the governor shall act as per the advice? No. So we can say that this advice and aid of Council of Ministers and Chief Minister may be called non-binding in nature. Although it is very well established that we are a parliamentary form of executive at both union and state level. So the governors should realize that this aid and advice is binding on them so that he acts as nominal head of state and the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers act as the real executive. But in terms of theoretical or academic interpretation, we can say that the article does not say that the advice of Chief Minister and Council of Ministers is binding in nature, right? But for all practical, political and constitutional purposes, advice is considered binding. And third reason why we say that governor has more discretion, it is because if you look at Article 163, it says except. Except insofar means except to the extent. It means except to the extent where governor is required to act in his discretion, then he will act as per the advice of the Chief Minister and Council of Ministers. It means there are certain exceptions where governor is required to exercise his functions in his discretion. But which are those functions? Which are those powers? Which are those cases where governor has to act in his own discretion? That has not been mentioned in the Constitution. In fact, on the contrary, interestingly, Constitution allows the governors to decide as to which functions, which powers they will exercise in their own discretion. It means it has been left up to the discretion of governors to decide that which powers are their discretionary powers. So this gives, again, a wide literal academic interpretation to the discretionary powers of governors. Now, these are three reasons that we discussed, which show that a governor of a state has greater discretionary powers than the President of India. Let us now look at the discretionary powers which are available to the governor. So in terms of scope, in terms of number of discretionary powers, no doubt governors have more. But let us see what are those discretionary powers. First of all, remember that the governor has all the discretionary powers at state level which are available to President of India at the union level. For example, in case of hung assembly, President has the discretion of appointing Prime Minister. And similarly, in case of Hung Vidhan Sabha at state level, the governor has a discretion of deciding as to who has majority and who can form the government, whom to appoint the Prime Minister, Chief Minister. Similarly, if the PM has lost majority in Lok Sabha, has lost no confidence motion, and Rashtrapati is advised to dissolve Lok Sabha, President may refuse to do so in his discretion. Similarly, if Chief Minister has lost confidence in Vidhan Sabha and advises the governor to dissolve Vidhan Sabha, governor may refuse to do so. Similarly, so all these functions, which I need not repeat, I'm sure you already know, all these functions which are considered discretionary powers of president, they are analogously available to governor at the state level. But apart from them, governor has some additional discretionary powers. Let us see which are those additional discretionary powers. First is recommending president's rule. Recommending president's rule. So Article 356 of Constitution, I'm sure students know that, contains provisions regarding president's rule. It says that if president is satisfied on basis of report of governor that a situation has arisen in which government of a state cannot be run according to provisions of Constitution, then we can have president's rule. So here there is a mention of report of governor. So writing that report and giving it to president and recommending president's rule to president in that report is a discretionary power of the governor. This is common sense, because in case president's rule is imposed in a state, the very first effect is that chief minister and council of ministers of the state are dismissed. So do you think chief minister of a state would advise the governor to request the president to impose president's rule so that the CM loses his job? No. This is common sense. Second is that when state legislature passes a bill and the bill goes to governor, governor has certain discretionary powers. Now these powers which governor has, which are called veto powers, are given in Article 200. And one of those powers in Article 200, which can be called discretionary power of governor, is that governor can reserve any bill for the consideration of president. It's like he can forward the bill to president for his consideration. Now remember, which bills governor can reserve is not given in Constitution, which means practically he can reserve every bill, any bill, for the consideration of president, except one case, when the Constitution makes it mandatory for the governor to reserve the bill for the consideration of president. And that is if the bill passed by a state legislature, if it becomes an act, it will derogate the powers of the concerned High Court. Otherwise, he can reserve any bill for the president. And third, governors of some states of India, they have been given special responsibilities which they have to discharge in their discretion. For example, governors of states in 5th and 6th schedule, governors of certain states like Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland. So these are some additional discretionary powers of the governor. I hope now you understand what is the constitutional position of governor and what are differences between him and the President of India.